Because of the way God created the world, because of the way God set up history, the actions that we take to get closer to Him are infinitely more impactful than the gestures that He makes to bring us closer to Him. In other words, heavenly acts have a tremendous impact, but even the tremendous impact eventually dissipates, or the visible effect of it dissipates. Whereas the more limited efforts which come from people, as opposed to coming from God, although it's just the efforts of flesh and blood and not divine in nature, yet, ironically, it has an everlasting effect. It's not as miraculous, and it's not as dazzling, and it's not as overwhelming, but it's also not temporary. With the efforts that we make to get closer to Hashem, those efforts have an everlasting effect. When it comes from us, it lasts forever. Some examples: the Mishkan. The Mishkan that we built for God lasts forever. Never got destroyed. It was never done away with. Hashem took it from us to hold it for a little while until He returns the temple back to us. But it's an everlasting edifice because we built it. Another example is that at Mount Sinai, when God came down to the mountain and we lifted ourselves up to God, God coming down the mountain was only a temporary effect, meaning that the mountain itself reverted back to being just an ordinary hill. After the fact, after the experience of Mount Sinai, the Mount Sinai went back to being a regular mountain. Anybody who wanted was able to climb it. It was no big deal. Because although there was an intense experience and an intense impact, but it was only a temporary impact because it came from heaven. But the efforts that we made during that very same experience, where we chose God and we accepted to be His people, and we entered into a covenant with Him, and we said Na'aseh v'nishma, Moshe Rabbeinu climbed the mountain, picking us all up closer to Hashem, that did not change. That was not temporary. We remain His chosen people. We remain elevated. We remain the subject of the word v'rei mamtanu, that we are above the fray, and that's been true ever since that day at Mount Sinai. That will never change, because it came from us. It came from below, and what comes from below stays forever, because it's from us. It's by us. It stays with us. This is why in the story of the revelation of Mount Sinai there are two descriptions. One description in Parshas Yisro, and one description in Parshas Mishpatim. The description in Parshas Yisro is the description more from Hashem's perspective. The description in Parshas Mishpatim is the description more from the perspective of the Jewish people reaching out to heaven. The description in Parshas Mishpatim, this week's Parsha, is about Na'aseh v'nishma, about Moshe Rabbeinu being called out by God to go up the mountain on our behalf, and it leads straight into Parshas Truma, which talks about the building of the Mishkan. In other words, that the description of Parshas Mishpatim is the description of our contribution, the description of the contribution whose impact lasts forever. Whereas Parshas Yisro, which is more famous and more well-known and more overwhelming and more dazzling and more special and more extraordinary, but is also more temporary. So this is the message to us, that even the smallest effort, we exert even the tiniest effort to get closer to Hashem, it may not be impressive, but it's long, long lasting.